40 for Rateable Crest Titans.
After some time away, the British Cross Country Championship is back, and with a fantastic mix of venues to test the crews as they fight for the title of the British Cross Country Champion. And with a great lineup of cars, we don't have any time to spare, so let's get straight out to the action. Isn't it good to be back? The first round of the series will be near Pickering in North Yorkshire, and it's safe to say that the conditions were not exactly what anyone here was expecting. Thick mud will be making it hard work to keep the car going where you wanted, even in the service area. But for Aston Cox, it would all be going to plan, starting to put in some good times and take the early lead this weekend, with Simon Kerfoot and Adam Evans sharing the co-driving duties. Richard and Mason Kershaw had led the event on run 1, but that fight with Cox was a fierce one. It would see them down in second place after the second run of the day. The difference, though, was small, only 4 seconds, in fact, between them at this point of the event. It had been a few years since Anthony Jackson and Mark Wood had been out racing, borrowing the car from Robin Clarkson this weekend, and even with the time out of the seat, they were quick. Second fastest on run 2, in fact, to lie third place on the overall leaderboard at this stage. Simon Adams and Richard Rawlinson make a good start to the event. Nothing to report for the pair, despite the obvious lack of grip out there on the course. They end the morning's opening runs in 4th place on the leaderboard. Steve Hill and Jim Canterbury were making a good push from the start. The Class 10 crew, of course, leading the way there as well, and with a good advantage in that position for now. Things looking pretty comfortable. Douglas and Melanie Devenold-Batt will be the first of the Class 5 crews on the leaderboard. They have a good start to their day as well. The car managing to get through the mud just about to end the day with 6th place overall. And Jason Rowlands and Liam Dudley would start the event off with 7th place, but the times were coming down over the morning's 2 runs. They'd be looking at bringing them down even further to get them closer to overhauling that lead. Jordan Oldbury and Steve Gardner had only just finished the car on Thursday night before the event. They have a little mishap early into the race as well, going wide on a muddy corner and running over the top of a big rock. Thankfully, just a small bend on the steering arm, not too much time lost. They lie in 8th place for now with a bit of work to do in the service area. And no issues to report for Rob Bull and Philippa Tennant. The car feeling good, things going as planned for now. The pair ending the morning 9th place overall. Rounding out the top 10 leaderboard will be Ian Gregg and Jason Noakes. Only 2 seconds back from Bull as well. The fight on, nothing at all in it for the crews at this early point in the event. Jasmine Philpott and Johnny Slark would be a little over-enthusiastic, shall we say, out of the blocks on the first run of the day. Getting one of the early corners a little wrong, causing the car to stall and losing the pair some time in the process. Jasmine almost pulled the entry from the event before the start due to a premonition of death or injury. Yes, really. So to still be going was a pretty good start, you could say. The same couldn't be said, though, of a few of our crews. We'd lose Mark Jacks and Adam Nicholson. They get through 2 runs okay, but that would be it for the pair. They retire before finishing the 3rd run of the day. A similar story as well for Willie Stubbs and Andrew Hill. The pair not even finishing a run before having to call it a day. A short start to the season for the pair. Tricky conditions then for the British Cross Country Championships, first event back out of the blocks. The first 2 runs complete, the leaderboard is shaping up like this. Let's head out onto the next few runs then. and it would all be changed at the top. Aston Cox and Adam Evans suffering a problem with the throttle sensor on the car, having to stop on the final run of the day, which drops them down to 27th place overall going into day 2. It would be worse news though for Richard and Mason Kershaw. They'd end the day with a few maximum times under their belts. Sadly, not going any further either. And neither would Anthony Jackson and Mark Wood, their event coming to a premature end when they suffer a wheel bearing failure, breaking the stub axle as a result. And with only 3 wheels on the car, well, they weren't able to continue any further, and you can't blame them. So that all left the leaderboard pretty much turned on its head from what we saw in the first runs of the day. And in first place now will be Jason Rowlands and Liam Dudley. Not only had they moved the right way on the results, but they had now taken the lead with almost 30 seconds of a comfort margin. Second place behind them and trying to make it as uncomfortable as possible will be Ian Gregg and Jason Noakes. Things still going well for the pair. They also continue to bring their run times down, run by run. The afternoon would see Paul Rowlands and Neil Lloyd moving into the top of the leaderboard. A slower start on the first run of the day had seen them outside of the top 10. But that changed as they got through the day to finish Saturday in 3rd place overall, leading the class. Not bad going. Jordan Albury and Steve Gardner, meanwhile, will be having a better afternoon, avoiding the big rocks this time and putting in some good times to end the day 4th overall, 3rd in the class. And aside from reporting things as a bit tricky in some of the muddier sections of the course, things were still going well for Rob Bull and Philippa Tennant. They were having problems clearing the mud off the windows at times, but let's say they weren't the only ones with that issue this weekend. Unfortunately, it would be a puncture on the last run of the day, preventing Simon Adams and Richard Rawlinson from gaining more time on the leaderboard. But as it was so close to the end of the course, it didn't affect their times too much. No disasters to report here. They end day 1 in 6th overall, 5th in the class. The afternoon had seen some good times put in from Dave and Anthony Hooper, moving them into the Class 10 lead and up the leaderboard in general as they get to the end of day 1, 7th overall, a position that they'd be happy with going into day 2. The change in the class lead, though, would be at the expense of this pair. Previous class leaders, Steve Hill and Jim Canterbury. A run 3 overshoot, dropping them some valuable time. Not much, but with things this close, enough to see them lose the position. Douglas and Melanie Devonald-Batt would also drop down the order a little, ending the day 9th overall. They were now 2nd in the class, of course, after that climb up the leaderboard for Paul Rowlands. Frustratingly for the pair, though, it would be game over. They wouldn't make it out for day 2. Rounding out the top 10 now then were Andrew Robinson and Tony Jones. Tony stepping into the co-driver's seat in the lead-up to the event. A little different to the last time he was out co-driving in the Mark II Escort on smooth asphalt. And speaking of rallying, successful Scottish Rally Championship pairing Mike Faulkner and Peter Foy were continuing their switch to cross-country events. And apart from a couple of spins and overshoots, well, rally drivers do try hard. They were going well. A little misfire would need looking at in service, but they lie in 11th place at the end of day 1. Things were going pretty well for Ben Cundy and Andy Greeny as well. The car suited to the conditions, that was for sure. But as the day went on and a drier line was starting to appear on the course in places, it would give the faster cars an advantage. And this was one of the pairs struggling to hold on to their position. For now, though, it would be the lead in Class 16 from 12th overall. Phil Bayliss and Lance Murphin had done a lot of work on the car over the winter break, including a new to them second-hand gearbox and engine, and at a total of £700 for the pair. That was proving that you didn't need a huge budget to be competitive in this sport, even at this end of the leaderboard. They end the day with the lead in Class 9. The only issue reported by Richard Watson and Paul Hughes was missing some mud flaps. They managed to find an old conveyor belt that they'd repurposed into some new ones ready for day 2. That's a strange thing to find in the middle of a course in Pickering. But there we go. They ended the opening day with no other issues, with 3rd in Class 10. A puncture on run 2 would lose Carl Duffield and Martin Wellock a handful of time. It was affecting their overall position, of course, and it could have been closer to the top 10 had it not been for that problem. For now, it would be 18th with the Class 11 lead. For Max and Darren Cook, meanwhile, it would be 3rd place in Class 5 for now. A little way off the leaders in the class, but still a full day ahead of them to try and make a difference there. And there was only the one crew to keep an eye on in Class 3 this weekend. But being the only ones in the class wasn't going to stop Ed Cobley and John Tomley from pushing the car hard. Overall times, of course, in their sights, and those times were coming down as the morning went on. They end the day 23rd place overall. On to Class 7, and Benjamin and Rachel Clay would open up a good advantage in the class by the end of the opening day, leading by around 3 minutes at this stage in the event. As it turns out, it could have been much closer though. Ironically, a maximum time on the opening run for Luke and John Sagar would cost them around 3 minutes when they broke the steering. It didn't get much better after that either, with a broken wiper motor and catching other cars on the course. For now, it would be 2nd place in Class 7 and some frustration to end the first day. Jesus Navarro and Raquel Dorado brought the McRae Enduro back out, and was it good to see it. Having competed as a one-off on some rounds in the past, this car wasn't built for these kinds of events. It was being built for endurance events such as the Dakar, and was used by Alistair McRae on the 2009 edition of the World Class event. That, though, wasn't going to stop them having some fun on this course. 2nd place in Class 11 for now, even if they were struggling with the muddy conditions. For Simon Rood and Adam Bunting, he will be 2nd place in Class 16 to end the opening day of competition. 34th place on the leaderboard. And just behind them on the overall times would be this man, Chris Ratter, Kenny Clark alongside, the only pair in Class 2 this weekend. So that trophy was theirs, if they could finish. It's all eyes on those overall positions for them. Richard and Owen Green were having problems with the mud overheating their car. They cooked the engine a bit too much on run 2. You don't really want to cook your engine at all, do you? They'd get things cooled down there and get back out, but we'll be putting a gallon of water in the car on every run of the day. And with just themselves to worry about in Class 12, it would be the lead for Nick Pritchard and Richard Griffiths in the class, but with 2 maximum times already. It wasn't exactly the overall position that they'd have wanted to be in by the end of the first day. There's more attrition at this end of day 1. We lose Andy and Harry Gibson. Only their 3rd off-road event after 25 years of rallying. A couple of overshoots throughout the day would affect their times, but there would also be an issue with the door, having to drive one-handed for much of the run to keep it held shut. So we reached the end of a pretty muddy and definitely grueling day 1 here in Pickering to start the British Cross Country Championship season. The leaderboard at the top is looking like this going into day 2. We're on to the 2nd day of competition then. No change in the lead now. Jason Rowlands and Liam Dudley continuing to hold on to that lead of the event with almost a minute's advantage. There'd be a change away from 1st place though, as we see Ian Gregg and Jason Noakes getting a maximum on run 7, dropping them down to 17th place overall. So in 2nd place now will be the 2nd of the Rowlands, Paul Rowlands, Neil Lloyd alongside, taking that spot behind Jason and making it a team lockout at the top as they go into the final part of the event. 3rd place now and feeling good in the car will be Rob Bull and Philippa Tennant. They weren't having any issues at all to report, things just going to plan, which was a good feeling. Things weren't going to plan and feeling as good for everyone though. Simon Adams and Richard Rawlinson were having a few issues of their own. The car overheating with the amount of mud out there on the course. But it wasn't anything that they couldn't manage. They get through Sunday morning with a bit of endurance to end with 4th place overall. Mike Faulkner and Peter Foy worked their way up the leaderboard on day 2 as well. They'd made a few changes to the suspension, but it wasn't having exactly the effect they'd planned. They were also having an issue with a loose door catch on the first run of the day, ending the morning with 5th overall. Andrew Robinson and Tony Jones would gain a few positions in these runs, ending the morning 6th place, a good position from which to fight going into the final part of the event. The course, though, was taking its toll on some of the cars, and we'd lose Dave and Anthony Hooper on the first run of the morning after leading the class at the end of the first day. And this sport can be cruel. We also lose Steve Hill and Jim Canterbury from the same class on the same run. They lost 3rd gear, having to pull over and call it a day. So with further changes to the leaderboard on day 2, it would mean we see Martin Cox and Stuart Delph stepping up to take 7th place now. And of course, with Aston Cox having issues on day 1, it will be Martin upholding the family honours at this stage. Richard Watson and Paul Hughes will be more than happy with their times. The course even seemed to be a bit easier on day 2. They end the morning 8th place overall, with a number of other crews wanting to know what their secret was. 9th overall at this stage will be Alan Kirkland and Sean Sabin Farrell, putting in some good times to move up the order. And rounding out our top 10 now will be Phil Bayliss and Lance Murphy. They were going pretty well, finding it tricky in the mud, as were most of the crews, but they were getting faster and crucially staying out of trouble, which today seemed like the main thing. So before we take a look at the final overall and class results, here's a reminder of the leaderboard after 8 runs so far. Here we are on day 2. On to the final runs of a pretty grueling event then, and in 24th by the finish, it would be Jesus Navarro and Raquel Dorado. They get a puncture on run 10, struggling to change it, the jack sinking into the soft ground. They do make it to the finish though, happy with how things had gone nevertheless, taking a Class 11 victory as well home with them. Chris Ratter and Kenny Clark complete the event to take the Class 2 win. No problem for the pair. They even went around the course again afterwards, collecting up the stakes and arrows for the organisers in the back of their racer. No change in the class for Simon Rood and Adam Bunting. They take 2nd place in Class 16 by the end of the event, 22nd overall. Phil Ibbotson and Peter King kept themselves out of trouble to take 21st overall. The Metro, always a spectator favourite, and still going well after many years of competition on these courses. Luke and John Sagar were taking the positives from this weekend, and that's the spirit. A couple of fastest times in the bag as far as the class was concerned to end the day, but it wasn't without its problems either. A blown diff and a number of punctures not helping with their overall result of 2nd in class and 20th on the leaderboard. Benjamin and Rachel Clay would be the only runners left in Class 7, meaning it was of course class victory for the pair. They also take 19th place overall. And in 18th, it was Jasmine Philpott and Johnny Slark, 3rd in Class 10. They hadn't felt that they were on the pace this weekend, but just happy to get through to the finish, while others around them were breaking their cars, of course, and sinking in the mud. It was great to be there with boyfriend and dad. Ed Cobley and John Tomley get to the end of the event with the Class 3 victory. They'd managed to get through these grueling conditions without any issues, finishing in 17th place on the leaderboard as well. And Steve Smith and John Griffiths had started to get faster as the event went on. Too late to gain any more time as far as the overall results were concerned, but second in Class 10 was theirs here at the opening round. For Max and Darren Cook, it would be second place in Class 5 to end 2 days of pretty tough competition. A good run to 15th overall as well for the pair. Ben Cundy and Andrew Greeny, meanwhile, would back off a little when they realised they were in the lead of the Trophy Rally Cruise. A bit of event management to do here, taking the Class 16 win this weekend and in 14th place overall. Not bad. In 13th place, it wasn't exactly the finish that Ian Gregg and Jason Noakes wanted, nor the one they came here for, especially having been up in the podium places previously in the event, showing just how long these events can be and that just anything can happen. But at least they get to the finish, taking that as a small victory in itself, considering the attrition here around them this weekend. Finishing just a couple of positions outside the top 10 leaderboard at the end of the event would be Robert Simonite and Simon Westwood, that name back in the sport once more. 9th place in the very popular Class 8 and in 12th place overall. Phil Bayliss and Lance Mervyn would drop outside the top 10 leaderboard on the final runs, ending the event in 11th place. But the Class 9 victory was still theirs, and they were happy enough with their times. It will be off to a live tuning now for the car to try and get a bit more power out of that budget engine, which was only running 300 brake horsepower at the moment. Only. We're on to the top 10 then, and dropping a position back into that 10th spot will be Alan Kirkland, with Sean Sabin Farrell alongside, taking 8th place in Class 8 as well with that finish. For Andrew Robinson and Tony Jones, it would be a drop down to 9th. Still a pretty decent finish, and the pair would take 7th place in Class 8 as well. Richard Watson and Paul Hughes will be happy with their 8th place overall. Pretty pleased with their times as well, and looking forward to the next round of the championship in a few weeks' time. They take the Class 10 victory home with them as well. A puncture on run 9 would keep Mike Faulkner and Peter Foy on their toes. It wouldn't keep them on the course in places though. Luckily, there was nothing in there to hit, and they get to the end of the event with a bit of damage, but with 7th place overall to show for their efforts. Keeping themselves out of trouble though meant that Martin Cox and Stuart Delph were able to get a strong result here in Pickering, finishing with 6th place overall, 5th in the popular Class 8. Aston Cox, meanwhile, had worked out that they could get back up the order if they had a big push on day 2. Simple science when you're an off-road racing driver, so that's exactly what he did, managing to make it up to a 5th place finish. Certainly, after being down near the bottom of the results at the end of day 1, this would be a welcomed finish to the event. It wasn't plain sailing today though either, losing 2nd gear on the first run of the day. Simon Adams and Richard Rawlinson would be more than happy with their result this weekend. They finished just outside the podium positions in 4th. A strong end to the event though. It hadn't been trouble-free for them either, but they'd managed to get away with a few niggling issues to still get to the finish with that strong overall result to start the season and open their championship account. On to those hard-fought podium positions then. No change for Rob Bull and Philippa Tennant. They end the event with that 3rd position. A good start to the season for the pair, and no problems this weekend meant that they are good points, but also some good confidence to take away from round 1. There simply wasn't anything that Paul Rowlands and Neil Lloyd could do though to get anywhere near that top spot, and boy did they try. They'd have to settle for 2nd place, but that was certainly well deserved, and if that's what settling looks like, well, we like it. The pair would finish at the end of the day over a minute ahead of 3rd place as well. But taking victory would be Jason Rowlands and Liam Dudley. They'd held on to that lead for a good part of the event, it had to be said, and they'd end the 2nd day of competition with around a minute of an advantage at the top of the leaderboard. The ideal end to the opening round and the best way to start the 2024 British Cross Country Championship season. So with the opening round now under our belts, here's a bit of a reminder of how those overall results shaped up here in North Yorkshire.
Jason, well done. It's been a good weekend.
Yeah, it's been a good weekend. The weather's been good. The car's been good. Had no punctures. That's a big thing. And yeah, just can't wait to the next round until I do the same thing.
It's been a tough event. I've enjoyed it. It's been good when the course has dried up a bit. It's just a case of keeping it going and not making any mistakes really, or not getting stuck.
Care 40 for Rateable Crest Titans.